Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Give Alfie a chance to dodge the question. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Batman.
Indeed. Today we're here to talk about this release that I think has kind of flown under the radar, guys.
Did
you know a new Batman movie came out? Yeah. Did you guys know a new Batman movie came out? That obscure character from Detective Comics.
Is that the dude whose parents died on Krypton and he was like rocketed to Earth as a child?
No, that's like someone with an S, like Sandman or something like that.
Sandman. Okay, got you.
Yeah, no, this is Batman.
This is the blind lawyer, yeah?
No, that's Ghost Rider.
I love that Marvel has a Daredevil demonic superhero not named Daredevil. Why the fuck is Ghost Rider's name not Daredevil? It makes no sense. Sorry, I ruined the bit. I was just curious.
Yep. Anyway, so yes, the new Robert Pattinson Batman movie, directed by Matt Reeves, starring Robert Pattinson, Andy Serkis, Zoe Kravitz, Paul Dano. Dano.
Yeah, Paul Dano, Colin Farrell, and John Turturro, and Jeffrey Wright.
Colin Farrell. I forgot Colin Farrell.
Everyone did.
In all fairness, he does not look like Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell's got a great interview where he's like, if you don't like me in this movie, bring the makeup artists, because I'm not in it.
Nice.
Like, okay, man, fair.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, interesting new film is out. The hype for this one, I honestly like... Because every year there's like a new superhero movie and there's like a huge marketing push for it, right? But am I crazy, or is this like one of the most heavily marketed superhero movies since The Dark Knight?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's because it's been so many people. They announced it like 3 years ago at this point.
Well, it depends on where you start, because they announced Affleck was writing The Batman with Jeff Johns in 2017. And they just never stopped making the movie until it got done.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Like, it's just the fucking most, like, obscure, like, tie-in commercials and stuff. The fucking, like, Little Caesars pizza thing that looks like a monstrosity. Yeah, like... It just reminds me of like when The Dark Knight was coming out, and there's this fucking random ass ad. I don't even remember what it was for, but it was like shot like The Dark Knight, and it was like a wife and her husband like walking around their room, and he asked her a question, and then she just like comes around the corner with like Joker makeup lipstick on and like laughs maniacally. I just remember like watching that commercial when that movie was coming out and being like, man, they're really over-marketing this movie. This is ridiculous.
There's also all the websites and the viral marketing and the and the posters hiding messages, and if you put like black lights on them and shit.
Yeah, which, I mean, I think that makes more sense to do with Riddler as the villain, and it's also kind of funny that, like, I don't know, I guess they do hide a Riddler clue in that manner, so never mind. But yeah, it's a little more fair. It's a little more, I think, like, earned compared to, like, everything that they tried to do with Dark Knight Rises, that like they tried to do with Dark Knight Rises and it didn't take off the same way. And I feel like this is just DC's got like a sense of marketing for these films a lot better than Marvel does. And Marvel doesn't really need to because they're just so well established by this point. But like fucking Zack Snyder kept BVS and Justice League in the public consciousness for years. Getting people to constantly talk about those movies before they came out.
Well, you also kind of have to hand it to Joker, because Joker is the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time by like a seismic ton, and well into one of the highest grossing movies of all time list. And it's an R-rated, like, taxi driver king of comedy rip on Joker that has nothing to do with an extended universe, with a very limited kind of demographic for people to watch. And that movie did crazy numbers and was all over the place in trailers and posters and online ads and shit like that.
Yeah. So I don't know, it's interesting to see how this one's been marketed. So I guess let's just real quick go round robin and see what everyone thinks of the Batman. I'll be the one to start and be like, yeah, it's pretty good. It was all right. I had a decent time. I have like a weird takeaway with this movie, which is it did nothing wrong and I was still kind of underwhelmed. So that I'm sure will like start discussion too, but let's hear your guys' general thoughts.
Well, for me, on like the opposite spectrum, because I'm definitely the person here who loved this movie the most. Like this, I was very excited from this movie since the first teaser, and like in the lead up to it, I'm more and more excited to it and stuff. But when I got to it and watched this film, like, oh boy, like this one was special for me. I haven't had a walk out the theater, no, I love this, I need to see this like 50 more times again since Into the Spider-Verse. Like this is already one of my favorite things. I'm gonna have to rewatch it more times because I'm still like coming off the hype from it because it is still so recent, and thoughts and like I'm already like solidified different things, and I was talking to Steve and Aaron a little bit about and had different takeaways on things. It's gonna be one of those things that as I sit on it will change and stuff, but just in the moment I'm like all for this film. This film gave me everything I could ever want from a Batman movie and more, and stuff I never knew I wanted from a Batman movie, and it the thing I felt from it was just truly like, oh damn, they did it. they gave me, since 1989 I've been waiting for a Batman like this, and I finally got one. I finally got him, so that's my takeaway.
I am somewhere in the middle, leaning more towards Alfie, where I think I have a lot more like substantial problems with this as a movie, but as a movie I think it's pretty good, and as a Batman movie I think it's the best Batman movie we've ever done. Like, this to me is off the page Batman in a way that I think we've never actually gotten the character right. This is a version of a movie where someone finally said, let's just make a movie about a dude who dresses up in a bat costume and solves crimes and play it straight 100% and put every dynamic you've read for 80 years just on film. And I loved seeing that, and this was my Christopher Reeve Superman kind of movie, where in the way Christopher Reeve just kind of was Superman, this movie just is Batman. That creates a lot of problems because you realize very quickly there's a lot of things about this movie that make perfect sense reading in a Batman comic that do not translate to a movie, and it kind of holds it back in places. But the kind of craft on display in service to trying to make a pitch perfect Batman is something I don't think we've ever done quite this hard. I think Robert Pattinson is easily, not even a contest, the best on-screen Batman we've ever had. There's so many things about this, like moving factors, that I really want to talk about. I do think it's too long, and I don't mean it's too long in the sense that movies should not be 3 hours long, even though I do believe movies should not be 3 hours long. It's too long in the sense that I think the movie's structure is kind of wonky, where I don't think you really have a firm grasp on where in the story you are at specific points. And Dark Knight kind of has this too, where Dark Knight's kind of like an awkward structure where it's not really a 3-act story, it's not really a 5-act story. It does kind of just keep going, but Dark Knight's such a tight script where every scene is always building to the next scene until you get to the conclusion as like a series of dominoes fall. This movie is way more about the vibes, and it's got a lot of plot cul-de-sacs and a lot of detours and stuff, and I appreciate all of them, but it's not particularly tight, and that creates more problems for me in the third act than it does anywhere else, where I feel like the third act is just a different movie. But aside from like the sort of filmy criticisms, I did really, really love this, and it was hard for me to come off the high, which was just the first 10 minutes. It was hard for me like to watch the opening scene where he's narrating and go through the whole night that he deals with, all the way up through coming back to the tower and saying he watches it all again so he can force himself to remember. Like, that 10 minutes is the perfect Batman movie, and I was so happy that I saw that, and that nothing after that I feel like could have ruined that experience, which is good because so much of it kind of just hits the nail on the head of why I like Batman. And again, it kind of gets into problems here and there, but like it's hard for me to be like super critical of the movie when it's like the first time I think we've ever actually made a legit Batman movie. We're not making movies that have a guy named Batman in it. This is not that. This is just a Batman movie.
No, I think I very much agree with you on that. It is the thing that feels the most like just that, because we talk about this all the time, like, technically Batman can never be out of character because it's a character that's passed down between writer to writer to writer. And so there's just like all these different interpretations. So like there's really no like one character for Batman, but throughout the years there tends to be like an overarching narrative to who this character is. And this movie felt the most like it fits that narrative of the character more than anyone else.
Yeah.
And I very much agree with that. It does really feel like just the most quintessential, truly like, you could adapt this directly into a comic and it would just be a really solid Batman comic. And I think that's kind of why I don't know, I guess I need to see this movie again to see if I still feel this way now that I kind of know where everything is, what everything's going to, but I guess that's the part of it that felt a little on the underwhelming side to me. It didn't help that this movie just had a mountain of hype going into it that I personally just wasn't really feeling. Like, I was sure it was going to be good, and I avoided trailers because I wanted to actually see it, and I'm always glad I did that because some of the shots in this are just absolutely jaw-dropping. But ultimately I ended up seeing it, and it's like, it's one of the least, like, and I don't really mean this in that it's bad for this choice, it is very notable to me. It is one of the lowest stakes, least epic superhero movies I think we've ever done. Because,
easily.
Because, like, Batman Begins and Dark Knight Rises both have, like, literally Gotham City will be destroyed. And then The Dark Knight has, like, Gotham's heart is on the line in this movie, like the soul of the city, right?
They have two ferries like set to blow up full of people. Like, you've got
but I mean,
pretty much mass genocide right there.
Well, no, that's not really like, that's a mass murder. That's like, I would say that the end result, bad thing that's going to happen that Batman needs to stop in this movie is more bad than the ferry situation the Joker was doing. I'd say just like the scale of Dark Knight was like the soul of Gotham literally being battled for. Whereas this, like, up until the very end, like after Riddler's capture to the end of the movie, this is just like, yeah, some politicians and police officers are gonna look really bad at the public eye, and people are gonna be really mad about it. Like, that's the whole fucking plot of the movie up until that point. And it's like, it's not that it's not good, it's not that it's not interesting. It is just, like, notably lower stakes, lower like, sense of what could possibly go wrong. Until you get to that third act, and then, yeah, Steve, I think you are right that, like, it's almost a different movie because the stakes suddenly ramp up to 11 to, I would maybe even argue, like, an unbelievable degree given what the film has shown us thus far.
Can we start there? I know we're kind of like jumping around a lot, and starting at the ending is always kind of weird, but I do kind of want to like spend a bit of time up front talking about this, because I feel like this part of the conversation is all anyone else is talking about. So I kind of just want to dive in and then dive out, and we can talk about the more interesting stuff.
Sure.
So here's my thing with the ending, and it's related to the runtime, which is anytime we make a long movie, you have two things that wind up being true almost all the time, which is, God, I wish this was shorter, and God, I wish this was longer. And both of them kind of speak to the same problem, which is you want the experience to be tighter and denser, but because you've stretched everything out, you feel like you need more material to offset for how thin some of the other stuff is beforehand. And I think the ending is a really good example of this, because the movie effectively wraps up about a full 30 to 45 minutes before it's actually over. And Dark Knight does this too, but I think Dark Knight is different because the stakes never feel like they have been settled in a way where I think it does kind of feel like it does here. And my problem with the ending is you get to a point in the movie where Riddler's got his armed thugs, and he's got this flooding plot, and he's going to cause general chaos and flood the city. And the way this movie has been playing up until this point is this super slow burn, walking in Zack Snyder slow-mo, coasting on vibes kind of Batman movie. And then you get to the end, and the gunmen are all signed up on the rooftop, and this Batman, who we see skulking around on garages, having trouble fighting a couple of goons, jumping off a GCPD building and getting his shit wrecked on the street because his parachute deployed and he hit a sign. He blows up the whole fucking roof and swoops down warehouse BVS scene style, just like ripping on dudes. And the color palette for the movie changes to this weird blue. He's moving around and fighting on a scale that we've never seen him do, with shots that have not been in the movie before, with a color palette that hasn't been in the movie before. And then you get like this mass flooding plot where, and I like where all of this goes thematically, mind you. I love where this movie is thematically, and it's got a great eye on where Batman's character is at all times. But you get to this sort of like massive sense of scale in this fight, where it feels like I'm just kind of checking my watch a bit, because this is not the movie I've been watching up to this point. And that fight kind of doesn't hit for me, because it effectively plays the same beat over and over again, which is Batman shows up, kicks a shit ton of ass, oops, he missed something, so he falls and kind of dangles for a minute before he gets back up, does it again, falls and kind of dangles for a minute until he gets it again, and then can I time before he falls into the water. And
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing that I think really makes that whole section feel like a little off, it's not bad, it's just it's not as like intriguing as the rest, is the fact that like Riddler's already in jail. So like on one level it should feel kind of cool, because like, oh man, he's set all this up, it's like he's figured out so much. But on the other hand, it's just like, yeah, but now Batman's just fighting the goons, right? You know, it doesn't have that same like hit if Riddler's not there with them.
This is the perfect segue, because then my deeper problem here is, and it's not that it's not there, it's that this is very muddy. It's that ideologically, what Riddler wants and what Batman is fighting at the end gets kind of messy, and I'm a little confused on where people land, because internet trolls deciding to take matters into their own hands, taking guns and shooting politicians and causing general chaos. I get the vibe of that. I get what that's pulling from and ripping off. Not ripping off, but like ripping from in the headlines and stuff. Riddler throughout this movie is exposing the corruption in the city. You see protests, you see the guy at the funeral who turns out to be the guy at the end who says I'm vengeance in the Riddler costume. You get a lot of like callbacks to like the decadence of the city that Riddler wants to call out, that he's frustrated by. And you look at the protest signs and stuff, and it's about income inequality. It's about the fact that the city never got cleaned up. It's about the poorest of the country the city getting abandoned after the one big rich patriarch dies. And you get to all of that in that great speech Riddler has about Bruce Wayne's being an orphan is different than him being an orphan. And then you get to the guys with the guns at the end. And unlike Heath Ledger's Joker, where every scene I am 100% aware of what point he's trying to prove, I am really confused as to what point the guys with guns are trying to prove by the end. Because I get Riddler's stakes up to this point. I don't get what anyone like really feels or is trying to say, or like what this act adds to Riddler's larger philosophy by the end. And because it's just kind of a big dumb action scene that ramps everything up, I'm not saying that it's not there and that you can't piece it together. I think it's just really, really unclear because it's so tonally at odds with the whole rest of the movie.
Steve, do you feel like this could be a case of they had the script up until Riddler getting caught, and that was like the original script, and then the studio said, no, we need a bigger action beat to end the movie on. And this is what they wrote in.
Exactly 2 points in this movie that feel like the studio said you should do this. One of them is the Joker scene. The other one is absolutely the third act action. Not even a third act, because it's not a third act, but the action scene at the end. I 100% think the flooding stuff at the end is, this movie has yet to have a big punch, and it's been going on for 2.5 hours.
That's kind of the vibe I'm having. Alfie, you've been so quiet the entire time. I have to imagine you're just sitting there seething with rage, and you're gonna just come out like swinging and explain why we're absolutely wrong and everything about this movie is perfect. What you got, buddy?
So like, yes, that, but this is just a funny vibe because like when I left the theater, I started talking to Steve about this movie and things. I'm like, a lot of these points we've like gone over like 3 different times together already, so it kind of gives the vibe that like rehearsing, like, all right, Steve said this part, now I have to say this part. But
well, that's why I don't talk about movies that we're doing a review on until we do the fucking review.
You're all good because my stances have changed a little bit more to where doing it for now I feel like I can more eloquently kind of explain my thing. I do agree.
Between Alfie and you and I is that I just say the same 3 things over and over again differently until you get my point and you eventually prove it wrong.
This is how he's thought. The thing with me, at least, because there was a lot that you and Steve went over, but I'll just kind of go through the ending myself and give my general take on why I think it's something that is very intentional and does fit with the thing of the movie that is very much a choice. But again, I do think it's one of those cases where just because I like this and I think this is well done, I do think this isn't. I think this is a choice from a creative. I don't think this is a studio choice. Doesn't necessarily mean I think it's been executed to peach perfection. I agree with Steve where I was saying the strength of the Joker in The Dark Knight was how digestible he was for a large audience, in that Nolan's very, very good as a director of letting you know exactly what this character is feeling in this moment. Like, Nolan gets a lot of like, oh, his movies are so... No, Christopher Nolan movies are some of the clearest, the most like, yeah, I know where this is, like, because he pays attention to that stuff, and that can sometimes be a detriment, the fact that he's very mathematical about, like, Del Toro called it like the emotional mathematics. Like, he'll like make sure this exact moment is this. So the Joker is definitely his end game, and his things are very clear in that final, like, and it's all part of the thing. The Riddler, I think, has a lot more ambiguity to it in this film, and how this thing goes. I think what kept me invested wasn't necessarily that this was a movie about the stakes for the soul of Gotham, was more so Gotham was its own separate character, but it's not the main character. The main character of this film that is kind of refreshing and rare is Batman. and the Riddler plot at the end really comes from the fact that scene where he meets the Riddler in that it's not even an interrogation, where he sees him, that glass wall between them is kind of when they fully codify that they're the same person, just gone on different things. This is the idea of the Riddler has been completely consumed by this persona that he wants to make. The Riddler thinks that how Batman starts this movie is where the Riddler is. The fact that we open with the shot of the Riddler spying on someone with binoculars, and then Batman's doing the exact same thing to Selina. It's all meant to be building to this one thing where you get these two orphans and they're basically seeing mirror images of each other, and Bruce has to confront with the fact that, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this whole movie is effectively like a revolt to, what are you doing for 2 years? What is the point of Batman? Like, justify your existence. What are you here for? And the reason why I think this larger extent of stakes comes from is we get not only a Batman who transforms at the end of this, but a Gotham who transforms with him, where the characters at the end of this movie, through the journey that we've been on, through this mystery, have all changed into the people we know of, and not in a sequel baity way, although it certainly can come off as like that, because every single fucking superhero movie, whenever a character shows up, is meant to be teasing, oh, the character will be in the next one. I think this is more a case of the fact that it's not meant to be teasing the Joker or teasing all these kind of things. It's just kind of the sense of, this is the new era of this city. This is the aftermath. This is the consequences. This big action sequence with this new Batman who comes in and he's fucking doing adrenaline shots. He's backing up. He's getting back up and about. Is because this is the first time that he's really become the Batman we will know. The Batman who is a larger-than-life symbol. He becomes less of someone who's fighting for his parents' death and fighting just for the sake of it. Now he's finally got a cause and an idea of what he wants. He doesn't just have this moment of enlightenment when he is lighting the flare, and like this before that, where he has this is with the Riddlers when he was Selina, is throughout this movie with his relationship with Gordo. So I think the larger stakes, I think the larger flooding of Gotham is needed, because you need to have Batman. It comes from a character place from Bruce. It doesn't come from because the action isn't shot spectacle-wise. We don't get a lot of the flooding until it kicks in, where it just suddenly sweeps the place and Batman has to come in. It's all from Batman's POV. It's all from his point of view, where Bruce has to kind of rise to these stakes and become more of it. You need a Batman who is helping people, not from just criminals with guns at the end of this, but from like natural disaster, from an elemental force that he'll be there to help them. He'll stay around with them. We get this ending shot, this ending narration from Batman. So this is a very long-winded way of saying that I think these choices are all very character-based, and certainly I don't think they're as tight as the rest of the movie, but I still think it's a really, really fucking impressive achievement in a 3-hour movie that you get to this point, and only then does it start to maybe show the seams a little bit. And even then, it was never one of these things where when I'm watching this film and I'm enjoying it and I'm in the moment, it wasn't distracting to me, at least. It wasn't something that took me out of it. It was something where I felt the escalation was justified, especially from like the Batmobile scene is kind of at the middle point of, all right, now he's gone from his own little motorbike to the Batmobile and the roar of that engine and the fire. That sequence is more extravagant to me in terms of its scale and the fucking flames and Batman walking from it than the ending sequence in a lot of ways. So I don't necessarily feel like it feels like a different movie. I think they build to it in like the score and the production. Of so Batman gets increasingly more mythic as he goes on. But to this movie's credit, he starts out pretty fucking mythic already, so it's kind of cool. Like, he keeps getting more and more hype. So obviously, Alf is going to be. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I'm talking for ages.
No, you're good. I was gonna play Alf the Advocate for a sec there, because while I don't like the flooding plot and the final action sequence, both on like just a technical level and also just on a straight up like scale level, I do really appreciate what it's trying to do thematically, because Batman falling into the water, being baptized by it, coming out with the flare and grabbing people and leading them out of the disaster. All of that sort of like quasi-religious symbolism, I think, is actually really, really interesting, and I think it plays up super well with the whole rest of the movie and the narration he gives off. And there is something to this movie about where Batman is very rarely the main character in Batman movies. Funny enough, where you watch Batman '89 and Vicky Vale and Knox are more the main character in that movie than anyone. If anyone has an arc in that movie, it's probably Joker before it's Batman. Batman Returns is a show for Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Christopher Walken before it's got anything to do with Bruce. Batman and Robin and Batman Forever both have the problem of the co-stars are so extravagant, causing so much mayhem in the production that Batman gets lost in the shuffle in that sense, where like Val Kilmer does a good job and has an arc in Batman Forever, but Tommy Lee Jones going to war with Jim Carrey over scenes and over how much they can ham it up completely buries him in that movie. Batman Begins, by necessity, is a good Bruce Wayne character study. And then Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises are both really good stories for Bruce, but all anyone can kind of focus on is the outside players, where like the heart of that movie in Dark Knight is Harvey Dent. The thing everyone remembers about Dark Knight is Heath Ledger's Joker. The only thing anyone seems to want to talk about with Dark Knight Rises is Bane's voice and plot holes. And so you get to this movie, and it's the first time where I feel like unambiguously this is a movie 90% from Bruce Wayne's perspective. Batman's in the costume the entire time, and there's a through line from beginning to end, bookended by the narration, that continues throughout the final action sequence that I think does service the story. My problem is just, by the end, it feels production-wise like a different film. It feels to me like the way they've been shooting the movie up until this point with the shallow focuses and the looking at the feet and looking through objects and stuff, a lot of that goes away in the final fight with the goons, where everything's a lot more wide-shotted, except for like the couple moments here and there where you're right in front of Bruce Wayne's perspective. And the Riddler ideology kind of goes away when Paul Dano is not the one talking to you about it, because the goons don't say anything. So it's...
I think the thing I kind of came away with the Act 3 is I do think it, like, if it's not studio mandated, it is a late edition. I feel like it's you know those times when you can kind of see the stitches of the drafts of scripts coming together, you know? But I don't think that means it's done poorly. Mm-hmm. I think it's noticeable, but it's integrated as well as it could be. But there are just things like, again, you can talk about like the thematics and the character journey and all that for days, and that's great, but like there's something fundamentally unsatisfying of the villain that set this all up isn't there for it.
Not even,
you know, like
spirit, the way Heath Ledger's Joker kind of is in the final scene with Two-Face, because that stretch of Two-Face talking goes on for like 20 fucking minutes, but it's riveting. Because you know in that moment Batman is arguing with Harvey Dent over, no, Joker was wrong. I need to prove to you Joker is wrong. That's that whole scene. But you get to this, and it does honestly, and this is my biggest problem, like it does honestly feel like the movie was over after he talked to him in the prison. It really felt like this was the cathartic moment that broke him. Because if this was me, and this is a movie a studio would not release, and this would get me fired if I was the editor. If I was the editor, and I had Matt Reeves and Paul Craig's ear and Paul Dano, I'd say, hey, Paul, why don't you say I'm vengeance in this moment? And then we cut, and Bruce does his narration, and the movie's over. That's my ending, I feel like.
See, I feel like that's something you don't really earn for why people would see him any differently.
Yeah, no, and
that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think it's just a matter of, like, would I rather have an incomplete finale to make a 90% great film, or would I rather have a complete film where the last 45 minutes kind of glaze over me? And I'd rather have the form.
I guess.
I mean, like, there's still stuff I quite like in the finale. I don't want to just, like, feel like I'm ragging on this the hardest, but, like, I thought it was a really, really smart, really good touch to have the kid of the mayor be the first one he saves.
Oh, that's so good. That's so...
That was, like, that hit so well.
Because he's consistently, like, if there's anything that follows a formula in this movie, it's that. You see him in the very first shot of the movie. He's the first character on screen. You see him in the murder investigation scene. You see him at the funeral where they make eye contact for the second time. And then you see him again at the end with the election. Like, they set that kid up and pay him off on, like, textbook levels of perfection.
It's so good because it's just, and again, it's what I was saying. Why I think this is something that you have to get from a intentional script beginning to end, not like a this was added in later thing, because that's something where, like, we don't have the origin of Bruce in this movie. We don't have a scene of the parents getting shot and the pearls falling or anything like that. But outside of something like a similar example of this, like something like Spider-Man: Homecoming, which a lot of fans, I think, you can agree with this or not, but like people noticed, like, oh, how did Uncle Ben die? And it was like the question was arose. So even though they assumed, oh, we can just skip over this because everybody knows it, you still can't really do that. You do kind of need to give us some information of, like, does what we know contradict what's in this or not? Because sometimes it will and sometimes it doesn't. So you can't just assume the audience knows it. You have to confirm what they do know, at least a little bit. And I think this film does a really good job of that. Just, we get elaboration on details and stuff, but just on an emotional level, the fact that Bruce gets to fucking save the orphan child, like, he gets to save himself, and it's the like, that's so good. Like, that is such great writing. Like, I love that so much.
That
again, I don't think it's like, when I say, like, it's a studio add-on, I don't think it's like the Marvel thing of, like, we've already, you know, edited this fight in CGI and now we just need you to put it in the movie at the end. I feel like it's just like a studio note of, no, this needs to have a bigger ending, and then it's like worked in. And I think, as well as it can be, I think that the problems with it are there, but like the craft and the skill present is still noticeable, because even though it has clear problems that arise in that third act, it does still function quite well with it, all things considered.
That's the thing about the movie that I feel like makes it very, very hard to kind of like rag on too much, at least for me, which is, this is such a well put together production where every cog is just working so well, going into overtime, giving us like this big, refreshing kind of career defining work on this movie, that it's hard to be like, okay, so the sum of the parts is not perfect, but every part is so perfect, you know? Like, Michael Giacchino has not done a score this good since, like, the fucking Incredibles with the fucking James Bond knockoff kind of soundtrack. This is the best score he's, I think, ever done. I think this is the best score a Batman movie's ever had. And even if it's not, it's the best incorporated score in a Batman movie I think I've ever seen, where people are legitimately just walking out humming these songs and these themes and playing up the vibes. And part of the reason that works is because the visuals and the music are calling so much attention to themselves in this movie. Like, the same way Pattinson is like gouging his eyes out so you can see his expressions through the cowl, the music and the visuals are like so in your face about what they are. There's no reason, right? Like, there's no reason for 30-second slow motion walk upside down from Penguin's POV while the slight western tinged Batman theme plays as he just kind of strolls and struts along, aside from the fact that you want to say this shot goes hard, this visual sets a vibe, and this music clicks. The Batmobile sequence in particular, where I don't think it's a particularly like visually iconic car chase. It's put together really, really well. It's an amazing production of a car chase where they do a turtle rig so that someone is actually in the car, so that Colin Farrell's been driving, or Colin Farrell's in the car the whole time and someone's driving from the roof. They do blow shit up. Like, it's a really put together scene. But the thing that makes it iconic is the way the shots look with the oranges bouncing around, and the way the theme music kicks in and is edited so perfectly, where the Batman theme like roars in only when you see the Batmobile bust through some shit. Like this is the kind of movie that I can just kind of put on in the background and be sucked into nothing but the atmosphere. For what I like about the Tim Burton movies is that they are entirely movies based on the vibes. There's not a lot of story there. There's not a lot of character there. They're not particularly great Batman movies, but I love them as Batman movies because I felt like that's the closest we ever got to like capturing the vibe of Batman. And this is, I think, my replacement for that, where this movie is coasting so hard on vibes that it's hard for you not to just kind of go with it the whole time.
I'd agree with that.
The technical aspects all coming together. I want to give a special shout out to the goddamn sound design in this fucking movie. Like, oh my! I watched this in IMAX. And I swear to fucking God, it was like Godzilla was strapped to the Batmobile, like that roar. Oh my fucking God, that is like, that design for the Batmobile was, that's cool. But like, they gave it a fucking roar. Like, that nitro burner kicks in.
Reveal since '89.
Dude, it fucking takes 89 to the wood chipper, man. Holy shit. Jesus Christ.
Like everyone's fucking talking about the goddamn like shot like from the fire with Penguin and shit, but like I feel like the shot that like way overplays it is just the reveal of the Batmobile with Penguin just like staring at it. It's like, the fuck is that?
It's like in the background where he's just like, it's like he's teasing him when he just kind of kicks up for a second. Oh, it's so good.
Well, it's like he could have run so much earlier than he did, and yet he's just like sitting there like in awe.
It's one of those things where like I told Steve this before, but I think it's kind of a perfect summation of like, because I can give like intellectual arguments, but like everyone knows Alfie, he's the hype man. This is why this movie kicks so much fucking ass for me. Is like, this movie has one trick, and that's showing you pitch blackness and then having Batman shit come out of it, and it does that trick so many times, and every single time it goes so hard. Like, oh my fucking God.
That's the thing I can't get over, which is I have read Batman comics for as long as I can like conceive of having things to read. I've had my dad, before I was born, went out to like a store and bought everything a little boy could want for hobbies: basketballs, playing cards, comic books, whatever. So since birth, I have had Batman comics, and I've been reading Batman comics my entire life with no break in between. And this is the first time I've watched one of these movies, and I felt like I was just seeing Batman. Like that kind of like childlike wonder of how much Reeves and Greg Fraser and Michael Giacchino are able to just create the vibe of this is Batman, but not just any Batman. This is the Batman that adapts basically every story of the last 25 years into a weird hodgepodge so you recognize it all. It's that Batman. It's my Batman. And it's really hard to like not be super excited about that, even though every story it adapts is a story I hate. I hate Earth One, man. Earth One's not good. I don't like Selena Kyle being Falcone's daughter. I don't like Hush. I don't like Zero Year. It goes to all the stories I hate, but then it just does it so well, I don't care.
Really,
it was so funny building up to that moment of like, does Riddler know Bruce Wayne is Batman? And like you get like the scene in the fucking in Arkham, and he's like, Bruce Wayne. Like he just keeps saying it, like the music's building, it's like, oh no. And then it's just like the simplest sentence. We almost got them all except for Bruce Wayne. it's just like that like moment of he doesn't know. Felt so fucking good because like I fucking love that just as a Riddler fan because that's like the thing that like in that moment, if he knew, he would be so mad because he sat here, he's like, being an orphan as Bruce Wayne versus being an orphan as me is not the same. He had the privileged life. He came out so good. He's not like you and me. We're the same, Batman. Like, God, if you wanted to, like, just ruin Riddler's life in that moment, it would be giving him the information that would, like, conceptually ruin Batman's life. I fucking loved that.
I want to make sure we talk about this because this is very specific to this channel, I feel like, and kind of would be, I think, doing a disservice to Ian's legacy if we didn't spend some time on this. Ian, what did you think of the Riddler?
It was pretty good. This is, I think, the Batman Riddler take I would have wanted in like 2010. You know, before we knew what before The Dark Knight Rises even had a title. Like, I think this is very much like the Riddler I conceived of back then-ish. Because, you know, it's a little too brutal with the death traps. It's a little too realistic for, like, my personal taste now. But I think there is, like... It's just one of those things of, like, Riddler as Jigsaw. It has kind of become such a go-to in the fandom, and it's not a bad take in and of itself. Like, you can clearly see the dots connecting. You can clearly see that, like, it's a thing. It makes him different enough from the Joker. There's a lot of good boxes that it checks, and I don't think I can ever, like, have a legitimate problem with making that choice. However, it's still not, like, the thing I would have liked. This isn't the Riddler take that I would have been, like, hopeful for. And in the modern day, you know, like, fucking 12 years later, ouch. This isn't the vibe I wanted from Riddler. I kind of knew it was coming. The second I saw that outfit of what he was going to be wearing, I was like, yeah, no, we're 100% getting Jigsaw the Riddler.
Interesting, because I feel like you're right. The Riddler fandom, really ever since Dark Knight, has been trying to get Riddler to be a thing outside of the comics, and the pitch is usually always something kind of like Jigsaw. And the comics understand that Batman has the best rogues gallery of all time, but the only one that seems to matter is Joker. And so you have, like, these slew of characters who don't have, like, a library of go-to great stories that you can read, and so some writer always picks up and says, okay, I'm gonna take this Batman rogue and I'm gonna give him a fresh perspective to give him the one take that everyone reads. Except everyone always picks Riddler, and none of them ever stick. So in the last, like, 15 years, you've had The Consulting Detective, you've had Riddle Me That, you've had War of Jokes and Riddles, you've had...
Thank you for Riddle Me That. Thank you for mentioning Riddle Me That.
Oh, you're here. You know I'm going to. You've had a Consulting Detective, you've had a Zero Year. Every Batman writer who's like, you know, I'm going to pick a rogue that isn't the Riddler and give him an honest take, they always pick Riddler. Every time. And it's really strange to me, because in that slew of Riddler reinventions we've had, none of them are ever Jigsaw. And this movie does the Jigsaw scene kind of with the second Riddle. But the thing I really liked about it, because I have problems with this version of Riddler as just a Riddler fan, like you do, Ian. I have issues with just, like, how much can you, like, really differentiate Joker in this universe from this? Like, not as a criticism, but just, like, as a curiosity. Like, where would you really go?
I mean, just give me, like, the most theatrical Joker ever, and I think we're good now, right? Like,
I know, and you know they're not going to, but...
I know, I'm so sad. Like, I don't know, maybe they will, though, right? Because, like, if they're just trying to go for, like, Batman vibe comics, and they go, like, as hard on Joker as they did on Batman here, it could happen.
But the thing about Riddler I really like in this is, I am a fan of, like, two very specific things, which are psychological thriller detective movies and true crime. And this Riddler is psychological detective movie true crime Riddler. He is Zodiac. He's got the ciphers and shit. He's in all. He's playing up all of the tropes of all of the shitty detective movies I like to watch. A lot of the modern ones and a lot of the older ones. He's cheesy as hell. The riddles. This is the thing I don't get. This movie is funny as fuck. I don't care what anyone says about this being dour and humorous. This movie is so funny. And it's almost always Riddler making the fucking joke. So, like, the thumb drive gag is the hardest I've laughed at a comic book movie joke in, like, years. It's so fucking funny. But, like, I really like the Riddler in this movie as a amalgamation of True Crime Zodiac meets Kevin Spacey in Seven. I don't like the Riddler as this is what my personal Riddler is. But my thing is, if that was the case, and I had to go off of my gut reaction of what I want these characters to be, I would have a hard time liking this movie. Because I don't like Earth One, I don't like Zero Year, I don't like Selena being Falcone's daughter. And the movie does all of it. But because it does it well, and because it plays up to my sensibilities, and because it throws up just so many iconic Batman things I've just never seen on film before, well, it's hard not to just be like, no, I'm going to go with it. Maybe Earth One's good, and I just forgot, you know? That's how the movie
Well, no, I mean, I think it's just one of those things, like, how many times has a comic book movie, like, taken the premise or a couple of the plot points of a really bad comic and just, you know, polished that turd, right?
Yeah, I mean,
like Old Man Logan,
this
for
is a bad
example.
example because Under the Red Hood movie and book are both pretty good. But I mean, Under the Red Hood's a classic example of like the comic is pretty good, the movie is great.
I put a burn in about an X-Men movie that, you know, for a universally praised X-Men comic, and it got kind of overshadowed there, and I just wanna sit there and acknowledge it.
The thing I want to talk about Riddler before we move on, because I feel like this again is something we'd be remiss. I am so like, it killed me that the Riddler is a what if YouTuber.
The last video, and he's just like, hi guys.
I don't. Paul Dano needs a fucking award for the delivery on hi guys, thanks for all the comments. Like, that is so pitch. I thought I was speaking. Like,
that is every YouTube video I have ever made. Hi guys.
So good. It's like fucking Geekvolution Steve talking about Tim Drake if you went off the fucking deep end. It's so good. But like, you know what's so good about that as well is this is a Batman film, kind of the same way the animated series felt, where it feels both current but also kind of timeless. Like, a lot of the architecture and how Gotham was built is like, there's clearly a modern day city and they're using modern day tech, but we're in very gothic looking buildings. The clubs are very seedy, and Penguin's just playing a fucking hey yo, come on, hey, come on. Like, it's like everything's kind of its Wayne Manor looks fucking Victorian as shit. Like, everything feels again like a Batman comic where it's the DC universe will have tech that we do, but the city itself will be different. I think that's super interesting. But we have that, and we have Riddler. It's like, yeah, if you put the Riddler in fucking 2020, of course he's a fucking streamer. Are you kidding me? Like, he'd be all over that fucking shit. Like, he would be the most like, he'd have a fucking Discord server. He'd have to do riddles.
The Riddler has his own emotes.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
the fucking green question mark's his favorite one. Oh.
Like, it's so fucking good. Like, but it's not just that.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is just funny. Fucking, like, I want to do a Batman movie or comic or something where it's like all the characters 10 years later after the death of Batman, and the Riddler's like the one who's reformed, and he just has like a Twitch channel where he does like riddle challenges the whole time.
So good. Like the thing about it as well is like, so we have that, but at the same time it's very much it's in the same way that Batman, the Riddler figures out the trick to win this war is to influence people, is to inspire people to act, to change. So he's got followers before Batman does. Batman, even the GCPD doesn't trust him. Like that opening scene where Gordon's his only ally, and I didn't pick this up on my first viewing, but like the idea that this is we get to see the very first time that Gordon brings him in on a crime scene, and even Batman's kind of like uncomfortable about it. It's like, well, okay, everyone's like, Bruce Wayne in this, his costume is the shadows, he is Adonis, he doesn't like to be looked at, and we take that character.
That was such an interesting fucking shot of him walking through crowds like that. You never do that.
Exactly.
Oh god.
There's all this stuff with this, is I feel like it really brought into. In the same way that a lot of Nolan's best ideas were like, instead of, okay, we need to find a way to justify this, twisting the character to fit into a real world for the sake of it, a lot of the best Nolan ideas were, this is what this character is, and this is just what they'd be in this setting. Like, I think Heath Ledger's Joker is the best example of that. That is just the
Alfie?
quotation marks world. Am I still there?
There you are.
You cut out real quick there. Is like, you're saying that is just the Joker, I think?
Okay, so that is just the Joker from the comics, but if you put him in a quote-unquote realistic world. Again, the Nolan world isn't realistic, but it's trying to be more real than, say, like the Batman movies or anything. That's a very good example, and this whole film is just that. Like, Selina is just that. It's not... she's just Selina Kyle's origin from year one, except they play with it a little bit. They play with expectations a little bit of like, okay, are they gonna do Frank Miller thing 100% and say she was a prostitute, or like they go with the expectations you have as a fan, but they don't compromise the character to make it fit. And the thing with Batman with that is you get to see, okay, so if Batman's going around with these fucking things, how does he get dressed? As a cosplayer, do you know how fucking awesome it was that they spent so many scenes justifying, like, okay, he needs to find a place to change? Like, superhero movies are just fucking forgot about that these days. Spider-Man's got a fucking tech suit that he just presses a button and now it's all over him. It's like, Batman just has to fucking carry his shit around. He has to have a third, like, kind of Roma look so he can follow people when he doesn't want to be Batman, which is out of year one and all that stuff. Like, so much attention to detail for this was legitimately, like, not tearing down Batman, but like, okay, here's the justification for it. Here's why it works in this universe. Like, and from the moment, again, that fantastic opening, I can't be everywhere at once. That's the first thing you'd bring up of like, oh, Batman, he's just one guy in a big city. Like, how the fuck is he going to do it? And they just immediately justify, oh, they're terrified. Oh, the shadows do the work for him. Oh my fucking god! Like, you had me already from just that. But like, this whole thing with the Riddler YouTube thing, like Falcone, Cobblepot, Gordon, like everyone in this feels how I hear them in my head, how I see them on the page, as if I could meet them out in the world. And that's such a without compromise. Like, it still feels like comic book Batman, but he spends so much time in that fucking suit. You get used to it. He's not Bruce. He's more Batman in this movie than we've ever seen in a fucking movie. 80% of the film, he's in that suit and he's a Moen. He doesn't take that cowl off.
When he's not in the suit, when he's just being Bruce Wayne, he's being like the Bruce Wayne that is just Batman.
Exactly. He's not. He's not there yet. He's not comfortable in his own skin. He doesn't want to be Bruce Wayne. He's ashamed of that legacy. Like Alfred trying to bring that out. So I see a lot of people critiques of this film, like, oh, he was a good Batman, wasn't a good Bruce Wayne, he wasn't a good thing. I was like, I don't think that's necessarily fair, because it's clear this isn't... It's not like they tried to do Bruce Wayne and Robert Pattinson couldn't do it. It's like, no, this is an intentional choice, where he's so young and he's so raw at this point that he doesn't give a fuck.
Okay, two things. One, I want to backtrack real quick to the cosplay thing. I do want to talk about the suit a little more in depth in a minute here, but I do want to finish on the Bruce Wayne thing. But just on the cosplay note, yes, I do love that he has to go find a place to change. He still needs like 4 people to help him get into that fucking suit in any time less than like 3 hours. I'm sorry, that one's still kind of bugging me quite a bit with the look of that suit, and it's just a very complicated, bulky suit. So that we can talk about the suit more in a sec, but I want to stick on the Bruce Wayne thing. So one thing I really liked is that the Twitter hot take is a character in this movie, and that's Mayor-elect what is it, Monroe Riel?
Bella Real.
Rial? Yeah.
Which is a great name, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great name. It's just the Twitter hot take blue check mark. Fucking Batman should use his money for fighting crime in the societal level as opposed to using it to dress up to be Batman. That's just a character in this. They just made that a character. It's like, Mr. Wayne, hi, I'm running for mayor. I wanted to talk to you about like the fact that you're not really doing anything. And they make it like a whole fucking plot point that like Bruce Wayne just is not paying attention to what his money is being used for. And so the Renewal Foundation, which is presumably being run with Wayne money, is just supplying like all of Falcone's crime empire. That's like one of the most on the nose best moves to just like, all right, you know what, fine, now we're going to address it so that the next time we see this character, he's going to be actively involved in all these things, and all of you can shut the fuck up.
I really appreciated that because I was kind of nervous about that from the trailers, where like I didn't need to see that hot take as a character or like justified in any sort of way, shape, or form. And I also didn't want a movie to kind of go out of its way to prove why that's a bad take, because that's almost giving it too much life and kind of defeating the purpose of refuting it, which is it's disingenuous and it's not worth exploring in fiction anyway. But I actually really appreciated it in this movie because the contrast, like you said, between Bruce and Batman is not there yet, and so he is just Batman 100% of the time, and tying in where the money goes to the Riddler plot about sins of the father and how much he actually knew about his parents. And the thing to me that was really interesting was we don't spend a lot of time in the comics kind of poking at what Bruce thought his parents were, because there are very sporadic instances where it happens, like Morrison in Batman R.I.P. or Tinian in the final arc, or the second final arc of his Detective Comics run, where Bruce very clearly thought he had perfect parents. He thought they were perfect, they were ideal, they were wonderful. They were literally an 8-year-old's idea of what mom and dad are. And there are occasional stories like Earth One that kind of poke at that image, but the kind of runaround that the comics do is they'll always kind of go to the idea of, well, they weren't perfect, but I'm going to cling to the idea of they were perfect because that's what makes me happy. Tinian does that probably better than anyone. Well, and Snyder kind of does it too, where he basically says Bruce's problem is that he makes people... He is too hard on people because he thinks that if they are not perfect, it fails to live up to the image he's created in his mind of what people should be, which are his parents. Which is really interesting. But since this Bruce doesn't have any of that baggage, and his parents just died and he just did not get over it, and he's become like this ball of vengeance, beating the crap out of criminals, he's effectively he's effectively betrayed by his parents a second time in that moment where he thinks that Maroni had them killed after they went to Falcone to kill the reporter who turns out to be Hush's dad. Like, all that stuff really works for me. But the Twitter hot take thing of it all that I actually appreciated was this movie marketed itself so hard on Batman is vengeance. And then they made a 3-hour movie to tell you, no, actually, Batman is not vengeance. And I can't stress to you how much that made me happy. Alfie and I were talking about this before, but Ben Shapiro watched this movie, and Ben Shapiro tweeted a tweet saying, the Batman hates Batman and it's a terrible movie. And everyone proceeded to dunk on him because, rightly so, if Ben Shapiro hates it, it's probably good. 9 times out of 10. But the thing that I thought was really interesting is that the moment Ben Shapiro didn't like the movie, everyone assumed what his take on the movie was, which is everyone thought he was mad that this is a Batman who is an emo beta male cuck running around with black bisexual Catwoman who wants to rob rich people and talks about white privilege. Everyone thought that was going to be his take. And because I'm a crazy person, I decided to actually watch his 15-minute review of the Batman, and that is not his take. It's not his take at all. And I think what's really interesting is that Ben Shapiro's take creates a really cool watermark for what this movie's reaction says about you as a person, which is Ben Shapiro's problem with this movie is that Batman compromises his need to catch bad guys and be vengeance so that he can instead save people and be hope. He thinks it's fundamentally not Batman-like to be about hope and saving kids, and being Batman does actually mean stopping crime by any means necessary and taking down terrorists. And the funny thing about it is, you watch enough superhero movies, and he is not 100% wrong on that take on Batman.
Sure. I mean, I think that's like the problem, though. Those are like the takes that we all think are kind of shit.
But that's what's interesting about it, though, right? Is like that take on Batman is not 100% wrong, but this movie's kind of going out of its way to say it is not that, and people having a visceral reaction to that aspect of it is fascinating.
Again, that's kind of why it worked so well with me that the Riddler wasn't part of that final punch-up, because I feel like that might have diverted the focus to stopping the Riddler instead of saving people a little bit. It would have shifted what the point of that scene was if the big climactic moment was, now the Riddler like falls to his death, or like, he's you're going to jail. Like, it has that moment where Batman stops it. I feel like that would have, yes, inherently that we kind of want to see that moment. We want to see the Riddler's been driving Batman crazy this whole thing, and then he doesn't ever get that moment where the Batman doesn't get to punch the Riddler at all this entire fucking film. He doesn't lay a finger on him, which I think is a really great choice, because I feel like that's how I think Dano delivers that scene without his mask really, really well. He talks about like my aspects aren't physical. I'm all in here. I don't have your tool. Like he had to use Batman to get what he wants, because he's not the guy who's going to be part of leading the goons and being in the charge of that, or being behind in the same way the Dark Knight, the Joker was very active in all his crimes, and the Joker's on the floor with. That's just how the Joker is. I think the Riddler's a little bit more, at least in this take of the thing, a little bit more like way behind the scenes, like in a different fucking country to the scheme that's actually happening, kind of thing. Like he doesn't.
Yeah, like I think you can get away with it because it's Riddler, but I don't think that it'll ever, like, the emotional or just like the vibe of it will ever quite hit. Like, you can make 1,000,000,001 reasons on logically why it's like a solid choice or the story justifies it or whatever. And I probably won't disagree with you, but it still just didn't feel right in the moment.
Right, and that's what I'm kind of talking about, is like, this is why for me it did hit. You know, like, again, I love a big climactic thing in the moment. It's not something that's going to work for everyone, and I do kind of, again, super fucking pretentious, but I do kind of like a lot of the shit in this movie that is clearly not designed for mass appeal. Like, a lot of this movie is very much like divisive, or like stuff that you can, because these are choices like Reeves has made. These are things that are his take that aren't necessarily going to gel, or it doesn't feel like this was a movie that they designed to tick boxes, or like, they have to think. It felt very much just like, this is Matt Reeves' take on Batman, and you're going to agree with some things, you're going to disagree with some of the things. And I'm sure as time goes on, because this movie hits so big, because I'm already seeing people like shitting on like the Nolan trilogy or the Dark Knight trilogy because of this movie. Give it a couple moments, people are going to turn on this movie really fucking fast. But I'm curious to see what's going to come out of that, because I don't know. Again, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. This film I love on its own. I don't have to compare it to anything else to make it better. But I do think there is something to be said. The comparison that someone made, that this cost the exact same as Black Widow, and just what that kind of means for the types of superhero movies that are getting pumped out compared to one like this that has a very long cooking time. And I think that's I don't know if that means it's a necessarily bad. I'm not trying to just say all of the MCU is bad or garbage, but I think there is a argument to be made for why these things used to take a little bit longer to make and be a little bit more specific to that individual creative.
Well, but also to kind of speak to that, and again, not to shit on anything else. I think part of what makes this movie work is it's making a lot of choices, and it's clearly a Matt Reeves movie. Insofar as the movie side of it goes, I don't necessarily feel like it's doing that particularly with Batman as much as it's just trying to play the Batman stuff straight, which is why I appreciate it so much. Because in any other script, right, there are certain kinds of things where you know the audience is expecting A, so you give them B with all of the evidence of A leading up to it. So a lot of people complained about how the reveals in the movie that kind of just like start ticking up at the end of the second hour are all kind of obvious or don't actually change anything. So people are like, well, of course Selina is Falcone's daughter. Okay, of course this is what happened with the Waynes. Oh, of course Alfred refutes that. The all of the random stuff that kind of goes into just like this being a Batman take. Like the thing with Falcone that a lot of people in reviews that I read were complaining about is, I don't understand why any sane person would assume that Falcone is working for the cops instead of assuming the cops are working for Falcone. But the thing I really appreciate about all of that is these are not takes. These are not twists. These are not, I know you read Long Halloween, so let me give you Long Halloween with a twist. It's just Long Halloween when he gives him the speech about getting shot and Bruce looking up at him. It's just When in Rome when Selina figures out that Falcone's her father. It's just Earth 1 when Alfred's like, you needed a father and you had me. Like I appreciate that all of that is so on the nose and so clear and so spelled out. But all of the artistic choices, all of the stuff that the filmmaking side of it needs to be doing are where all the risks are being employed and what makes it so good. Because Greg Fraser shot Dune in a similar way to this, and he gets the style from David Fincher, which is they got a bunch of broken 80s lens or 70s lenses, anamorphic lenses that most 80s movies are shot on, and a lot of those lenses would be between like 80 or 85, and they got busted up ones that were like that shot in like 88. And what they ended up doing is they got like a very broken visual with those digital 70s lenses. And then they printed the movie, the digital film, onto real film, and then ran a bleach bypass to get rid of all of the silver from it. And so it created like this really stark image where the reds and the warm colors really pop, and the blacks are blacker than anything you've ever seen. And it's a process that he got nominated for an Oscar for Doom, that he turned up to 11 on this movie, because even Dune doesn't go this far, and even Fincher doesn't go this far. And so, like, it's actually doing something inventive with the filmmaking. Same with the Michael Giacchino score, with the way it's spliced into the movie, and him innovating on a music level that he has not done in decades up to this point. And I know this is not as universally hyped or as universally loved. To its credit, Joker did the same thing, and that's kind of why I like Joker. Like, Joker had groundbreaking cinematography in a lot of ways. The guy who shot that movie created an algorithm so that people can create effectively cinematography mood boards digitally so that they can create the look of a film in real time before they start shooting, so they know what they go into. The same with the score for that movie as this movie, where they wrote the whole score before the movie started filming so they could play it on set and the actors could react to the music. When Joaquin Phoenix is dancing in the bathroom, he's dancing to the actual music on set. And that kind of stuff, that kind of like very much counterintuitive, hard work, working within the confines and then busting through those limitations kind of filmmaking in a superhero movie is always refreshing, because you have these larger than life characters that have been around for 80 years. And like something like Star Wars, they kind of necessitate you kind of breaking the cinematic mold a bit. Batman is a comic book character first and a movie icon second. Cinematic language has evolved around Batman to a degree, but it's never had to kind of push itself to capture the Batman-ness of it until I feel like this movie.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. There's a lot of like, again, I'm underwhelmed in some ways, but I still think it's all really well done. And then one thing I'm like, just please, for the love of God, if anything about the success of this movie influences superhero movies going forward, please let it be the cinematography. Please let it be just the atmosphere and the look of the film. Not that I want every film to look like this, but I want the studios to go, oh, people like it when it doesn't look like gray and flat and boring.
Yeah.
You know? I never want another fucking Civil War airport fight again.
Well,
after this fucking movie.
Especially not when like you contrast the chase sequence and stuff in this movie to something like the chase sequence in like Shang-Chi, where like Shang-Chi is an entertaining enough movie, but like there's nothing that differentiated one chase sequence in that movie from a chase sequence anywhere else in that movie. Whereas it feels like with this movie, it's almost like theater, where they have a very limited number of sets, and every set has its own color palette, its own layout. It feels very lived in, and so you get from one scene to the other, and it feels like you're transporting yourself into different things. Batman beating up thugs in the Iceberg Lounge, which awesome that they called it the Iceberg Lounge. That made me ridiculously happy. Batman beating up thugs in the Iceberg Lounge is visually very different than him beating up the Riddler thugs at the end of the movie, and it's also visually very different than him beating up the kids on Halloween at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a couple things. Number one, if they're gonna give like this like secret club a name, I'd prefer if that one was the Iceberg Lounge and the main club was the other one, because yeah, 44 Below. It would have hit better if 44 Below was like the main name and the Iceberg Lounge was the mob hangout.
I feel like if the Iceberg Lounge was the underground one and 44 Below was the above ground one, it would have to be called 44 Above.
I don't give a fuck. Anyway.
And then that kind of gives away the fucking name.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, Jim. What's it above?
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Criticism in line with that. That joke you just made is not above this movie, because the La Rata, the El Rata is the dumbest thing I have ever seen.
No, but it's so funny. I don't give a fuck.
No, yeah, that was the one I was building to.
Scene where he's like, "That's the worst Spanish I've ever heard."
No, he's fucking like, no me para español.
From stool pigeon to penguin to bat to falcon.
Oh, you know why as well?
45 minutes.
That I really fucking killed me as well specifically is like, I love the Gordon-Batman relationship in this film. This is my absolute fave. Like, I really like Gary Oldman Gordon. I think he's fantastic. Steve said this point a little bit earlier, so I'm just gonna fucking steal it from him. Him and Batman are very much just like soldiers in arms in those movies. They're very much like at a little bit of a distance all the way until like The Dark Knight Rises. In this, I truly felt that Gordon was just his like tired best friend. Like, they really just have such a chill vibe. It says what, because this Batman's got such a fucking presence when he walks in a room. You know what this reminded me of? They felt like if they made fucking Tarkin and Darth Vader buddy cops. Like, and it's amazing. Like, that's exactly the vibe Gordon and Batman should have. But like the fact that they're there, right, and it's like that Tarkin and Vader, very Holmes and Watson. I 100% believe these fucking competent, crime-solving fucking Batman can tell what type of fucking blood on a wound is. Literally, he's the world's greatest detective. I 100% believe in the same, but Sherlock Holmes doesn't know a single fucking thing about the solar system, that Batman has not bothered to understand Spanish properly. This specifically this version, obviously in comic Batman different, but specifically this young fucking Batman, I kind of like that he makes such a simple fuck up, because there's so much moments in this movie like where he's the gliding and he just fucking face plants and just eats shit, like where he gets hit so much in this fucking film. This really did a lot to justify young rookie Batman without making him not feel like Batman still, and that's such a hard line to walk. But I think they fucking nailed it. But yes, outside of that, the fucking Gordon Penguin Spanish, see, like, Colin Farrell is so fucking good at this. He's so funny.
My thing with it is I'm just
Gordon's
like,
got some of the best like comedic one-liners or punchlines or just like little punctuations on jokes in this movie. Like when they go into the orphanage and Batman's like, no guns, and he's like, that's your rule, man. And then there's the scene with the thumb drive again, where like after they're putting it into the computer and he says it's encrypted, Batman like gives him the thumb and he's like, use this, and Gordon's like, this guy's hilarious. It's just so funny to me.
like, my thing is, I like that scene well enough, like Colin Farrell being like the one that unravels the mystery for them because he apparently speaks Spanish. That's all good. It's just like, come the fuck on, rat with wings, and it takes that long for anyone to think of bat? Fucking
rat
really?
With wings is bat in my brain immediately before it's fucking stool pigeon or penguin.
Well, like, that's the thing is, like, is that just my thing? Because, like, I've read so many goddamn Batman comics and I'm so used to hearing that. Is that, like, not an actually common thing outside of Batman comics?
I think it's one of those things that's both. The thing I got with it is kind of, again, it doesn't justify it. If it didn't work for you in the moment, it didn't work for you in the moment. But the thing I got with it is, like, Bruce is intentionally, and like they're intentionally kind of avoiding the subject that it's Batman, like, because the answer is obviously it's Batman, but I think the vibe you're meant to get is that Batman isn't used to being a tool in someone else's thing the way he is, with the fact that the Riddler's writing him to specifically is like unnerving him because it's bringing him into the public in a way that he wasn't for these past 2 years. Like, this is the first time he's had this much of a presence to the rest of the world, and the rest of that, like, getting specifically called out and stuff, I think is just something. Yes, it's obvious that the rat with wings is Batman, but I think he's deliberately trying to find any other fucking thing it could be except for that, and it's kind of like a character flaw. But again, it's not executed perfectly. It's not one of those things where, like, again, if that didn't work for you, Steve, it didn't work for other people. Like, it's not me justifying that and giving like here's what they
it's just they spend so much time on it, you know. That is the riddle, the question they spend the most time on in the fucking movie.
There is
and it's like the most obvious thing, right? Like, it's just kind of staring you in the face the whole time.
Yeah, there's something about it where, like, it's a conceit, so like I don't want to think too much about the riddle itself, but because it's a conceit for a good like hour of the movie, it feels like it kind of has to be a good conceit. Because like my thing is, I really like this movie as a moody Batman spin on Blade Runner 2049. Like, I would compare this to 2049 before I would compare it to Seven or like any other host of movies it's getting compared to, because I don't think there's apt comparisons for a large part. Because Blade Runner 2049 is also a nearly 3-hour movie where the main character is a detective who is very smart about some things, but kind of a hopeless moron about other things, and spends the entire movie just kind of like slow walking from one plot cul-de-sac where something is kind of related to the next plot cul-de-sac where something is slightly more related, where if you like really map out the detective work it takes to get from point A to point B, the thing both Blade Runner 2049 and this movie do is theoretically you could get from point A to point B from the inciting incidents in both movies. It's all there, but the protagonist kind of has to go on this moody journey to become a different person before he faces that conclusion. And so the reason it's not Seven is that Brad Pitt's character in Seven doesn't have an arc the same way Agent K or Officer K and Batman do here, where he breaks at the end and just fucking kills Kevin Spacey because Kevin Spacey gives himself up and proves a point and he's right. Batman and Kay are going through this entire world, unraveling this one mystery that shakes the idea of who they think they are. So when they do solve it, they have to approach it in a way that's different than how they would have if they started the movie from there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair. It's just, again, it's just such a long amount of time spent on that plot point, and it's just like screaming at you the whole time, and the reveal for it is like just not as good
and I mean there's a
as
lot
I
of
feel
stuff
it
like
needed
that
to be.
here where like this is not a tight script. This is a script designed to shoot very, very long, moody scenes. And so, like, the Penguin stuff really effectively could just kind of be cut out of the movie. There's like a good half an hour of that movie wasted on the Penguin. I don't want to say wasted. Focused on the Penguin that doesn't actually need to be there. But because it's like so much fun, and because it does so much for like ramping up who this version of Batman is and seeing so many cool things, I wouldn't want to cut it. Like this is, in my opinion, this is not like Martin Scorsese cinema where everything is like building to a perfect crescendo. This is, in my mind, what an ideal blockbuster movie is, which is, in a lot of places, it is stupid and fun, and I'm having a great time. But the artistry behind the stupid fun is top tier.
No, I think that's all fair. So, okay, the other major thing I want to make sure we talk about is the suit.
Trash.
Because, yeah, I am not
It's
a fucking
trash.
fan of this suit.
It's such a bad suit.
Not good. Like, not even in the context of what he's got in the film. Like, this is year 2 Batman. He should be like 3-4 suits deep by this point.
I love the cowl. I love that you can see more of his mouth and you see his eyes, and Pattinson acts really well. The movie shoots the suit incredibly with the deepest of blacks and focusing on the boots and always closing in on his face, and he's always kind of in like a 45-degree tilt, and the ears are kind of the perfect length for how big his face is. It's all perfect in film. The suit itself, though, anytime you just kind of get a look at it, is awful.
Yeah, no, I do not like it at all. Especially, like, I think the worst shot of the movie, it's kind of disappointing because it's like the one a lot of the trailers have shown and stuff is the fucking cutting the wire epic, like, close up, and it's like it's a really important shot for like his character and everything, but it's just like, oh man, that's not a good look at that suit. That's I do not like this suit. And then like somehow it had a moment, like it wasn't good. I've never like loved the suit in Dark Knight or Begins in particular. I don't think they're like trash, but I've never particularly cared for them. This did a moment where it was like objectively worse than something in the Nolan films, and that was the fucking flight suit going over it. I like, how the fuck does Christopher Nolan's like most practical Batman, quote unquote, do the more fantastical thing where when he flies he actually looks like a bat, compared to this fucking Tomb Raider 2 from 2003 fucking flying squirrel suits shit. Oh my god, I hated that. It's so awkward.
That is rough. And the way the movie just like immediately cuts away from him scraping himself off the floor back to the bat signal wearing the regular suit is so jarring.
I do not like this suit at all.
I definitely agree with you on the wingsuit bit, Ian. I think that was something that I just like. I would have kept he fucking eat shit at the end, because I think that's a good. You don't expect.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. That part's fine.
Yeah,
that part's fine.
The look of it is just, yeah, I don't like how it's shot. I don't like the design of it. I think that was a moment that actively did make me like, okay, I was so in. I'm so in, and that part took me out a little bit. That I think is a.
I like that he's scared right before he uses.
Yeah, that was great. All that like in script, I love that. How it's done and like the costume design for the windsuit, I think was really bad. So I've had like such a fucking complex relationship with this goddamn bat suit and stuff. When I first saw it revealed, I was like, oh my god, we're going back to armor. I thought we'd got rid of that. I thought Ben Affleck, like that was the one good thing from BBS, is they finally got back to a fucking grey bat suit that was just a costume. But as more things gone on, I was like, okay, I like the cowl a lot. I think the cowl's really cool. I like it's kind of stitched together. I think the ears are a really great length, and I like how it's very unforgiving to like a lot of people, but you can tell it was actually designed around Pattinson's face. Whereas like the biggest issue with like a Batman Begins suit, for example, is that cowl is fucking atrocious. Like Christian Bale's mouth is so tiny in that cowl that it really, really, like, especially if you compare them like side to side, it really looks like Christian Bale was trying to like squeeze his mouth through like a letterbox. Like it's really, you can see like his cheeks are kind of like puffed up a little bit. It's not. They really did Bale kind of, because Bale's got a decent jawline. They kind of did him dirty with that suit. So I like the fact that it is still black and grey. It's shot so dark a lot of the
Very
times
dark.
it can be hard to tell, but it is black and grey, and I think in the film itself and how it moves, Patterson can move really well. It doesn't interfere with the fight scenes. He could turn his head. This fucker can act in it like no one else has ever acted in a batsuit before. So the noise of the cape, like they do everything they can to make it work in the film. To where in the context when I'm watching the film and I see the suit, it doesn't bother me. Like the wingsuit scene does, but the actual suit itself, I'm like, okay, yeah, I can buy it. This is very Arkham Origins kind of. It's the best attempt at an armored batsuit I've seen, but outside of that, I'm just objectively talking about him. Yeah, I don't like the suit. I don't like the choice of armor. Ian's point of like, again, it's great that they put in the script that he got changed. If this was just comic Batman suit, that would make 100% that he could get in at that, because he could just wear that under his regular clothes basically. All he needs to pack would be the cowl and the boots and shit. But it's not that, it's big hunky armor. So again, I do have to, I'm going to be curious to where we evolve with it, because there's a lot of aspects of this I think work really, really well, and I wouldn't want him to, a lot of the stuff with the cowl and stuff I wouldn't want him to lose, because I think that could hurt his performance and not give the same vibe. But I definitely would like, and I think this movie, it's in a realm where it's definitely taking itself seriously, but there is a little bit more comic booky here than Nolan was, I feel like, to where I think I could believe a more kind of traditional Batman costume in like the sequel or the third movie, or just leaning towards.
I mean, it's just like we live in a world where there's literally like carbon fiber clothing and stuff, and I'm just like, Bruce Wayne's a fucking billionaire. In one of these movies, just give him spandex that's fire and bulletproof.
That's what he did in
I will
BVS,
say,
Fucking like contact lenses in this movie that are way more sci-fi than most of anything Nolan did. And I'm sure you could justify a costume with that technology.
right? Like it's just that's the thing for me that's like just kind of eating me up with like the costume choices. It's just like it's just so bulky and shit. And I will give it credit. It looks like armor and it functions like armor in this movie. I will say that I legitimately believe that like all the times he gets shot at and beaten and stabbed and every other thing under the sun in this and falls off skyscrapers, I legit think that like given how bulky his fucking suit is, yeah, he could survive that.
Okay,
That's 100% believable. But just like this is for armored Batman. He goes through some fucking shit in this, and it actually justifies the armor in that regard.
So I wonder if that was the thing, but again, it is what it is. I can only hope for the thing that we move away from it at some point, but the one Batsuit I really, really like is the fucking BVS, and like I don't like that movie, and then the other one I really like that I think it only works in that world is the Return Suit, but I think the Return Suit only works if Tim Burton's directing it in that. It's not a costume that works outside of that context, and the '89 suit is. People think it's the same suit, but no, if you look at it, it's like kind of dog shit, like how it's made. It really doesn't hold up. The Return Suit, though, is very pretty.
The Return Suit has always fucking bugged me for that scene at the end of the movie where he rips off the cowl to, like, confess that it's him to Selena. And you just see, like the inch-thick rubber, and it's just like, oh, man, that, like, undermines the entire thing,
Like,
doesn't it?
again, that's just one of those things where it works in a Tim Burton movie, you know? Like, it's alright, everything is. I believe everyone's fucking wearing that. The Dark Knight movies I still really fucking love, but, like, this suit I think is a huge improvement over both the Dark Knight suit and the Begins suit, so it doesn't...
I could see maybe Begins, but I think the Dark Knight suit's better than this one.
If you want to talk about busy, Ian, Jesus Christ, the Dark Knight suit is fucking busy.
Yeah, but like it's justified in story more and everything. This is just fucking bulky as shit, and it's just like I don't know what those little tube dart thingies on his arms
no one
do.
ever will.
Yes.
I mean, I think to be fair, I think the Dark Knight suit and this suit justify themselves in their own universe perfectly fine. They just both look like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And again,
I mean that's fair. Like I've never like particularly loved the Dark Knight suit, but I've never understood like the vitriol and hatred for it. This thing, like I looked at it and I actively hated it the entire time.
This movie does a perfect job filming this suit to make it look as good as it possibly can, and in most of the scenes where you're not focusing on the armor and the gauntlets and shit, it looks great with the way it's filmed. But it's just a bad suit. And maybe this is just me. I hate that he's bulletproof. I really, really don't like that he's bulletproof. Like it's so much. There's just something about this movie having like dynamic action scenes you can see, where he's just like rummaging through guys, that feels so much less impressive to me if he's just walking through gunfire.
I mean, I think like with Batman, at a certain point he needs to be. You know, like at a certain point, you just kind of need to give him that.
I think you can give him that without doing the thing in this movie where it's badass as hell on a certain level, but I think you can do that without giving him the literally walking through two guys firing assault rifles at him.
I will give you that, but I will also refute that it's hype as fuck.
Batman is bulletproof enough so if some dude shoots him, he falls back and gets back up. Or if someone fires a shotgun and there isn't a hole in his chest. Keaton's suit is the same way. It was bulletproof to a point. But like you can't be walking through assault rifle fire. I'm sorry.
But Steve, I'm but like it lights up the scene and it goes hard as fuck.
I think it can go. I think it can go hard as fuck. It's Dark Knight Rises, right? Dark Knight Rises is a very similar scene where there's a black tunnel and the gunfire lights up and he dodges the bullets.
Right.
I think that is my preferred approach to these kinds of things, and Bulletproof Batman is just one of those things where the character is so defined all the time by his mortality and guns that it just feels weird when he's walking through gunfire in my head, and I can't reconcile it. I can reconcile Batman killing. I can make you an argument.
This is not true. This is not true. You are perfectly fine with Batman walking through gunfire. And the reason I know this is because that really fucking annoying pineapple guy on Twitter during the early days of Tom King's run for the scene in I Am Bane kept complaining about the fact that Batman was walking through assault rifle fire, and you're like, no, it's fine, it's not important to the story, it just works.
When was Batman walking through gunfire in Tom King's run?
In I Am Bane, when he fucking goes to the island and shit, he's like getting just directly point blank shot at.
He dodges all of those. What? He does not walk through
No,
that gunfire?
100% point blank. 100% point blank. He is getting shot at. He is not dodging a goddamn thing. Steve, I promise you he was.
I don't think so. But anyway.
Yeah, in the suit, I think we're all in agreement. If y'all are listening, the one change it for the sequel, take the good out of it, let's this one could do some work.
I don't have a ton more to say aside from the fact that I didn't need a Joker cameo. I like the actor.
I did not like the Joker scene.
I like the actor a lot. I think he could make a great Joker. I have no doubts in his ability. I don't like the Joker scene, and I don't want it. And you know what? You tested two versions, one with, one without. Should have stuck with the one without.
Yeah,
it did feel like very end creditsy, didn't it?
That's the thing that I agree with you guys. I as well. I think you should have cut that, because specifically my reasoning for it is, I know Erin would have liked this film more if the Joker's, because she has like a visceral reaction to anything with the Joker in it. She's been cut, so I know ending on that note like soured it more for her than it would have otherwise. So just personally, I'm like, damn it, man. But the thing with me with that is, Ian, do you know about the other scene that was meant to be paired with it?
I think you guys are talking about it, that, like, he was supposed to go see him in Arkham at some point in the movie?
Yeah, so, like, the original thing is Batman's trying to get, like, a profile on the Riddler and why he's writing to him. So he goes to see the one person like this he's encountered with before, and it's, like, kind of shot like how the Killing Joke's opened. They haven't released this online. Matt Reeves just described it and says he's going to release it at some point. And Joker's kind of in shadow, but you can kind of get a good look at him, and he's like the man who laughs kind of vibe. And Joker says, "Oh, it's almost our anniversary, isn't it?" And Batman's like talking like, "What's this guy want from me?" And Joker just effectively saying, "Oh, I don't know why you're trying to find his methods. You're the same. You're him." He's basically telling the general theme of the movie that Batman and Riddler are two sides of the same coin thing. And then that was meant to be bookended from the fact that after the Riddler's put away, the Joker connecting with him is meant to be part of the fine that when Catwoman says at the end of this film, like, Gotham's never going to change, like, you can be Hope, you can do these things, but bad people are always going to be. The reason he wanted to keep that scene in, even though he deleted the other one, is he wanted a sense that Catwoman wasn't just talking in the abstract, that the audience was familiar with the, yes, Batman can help this, but Gotham is still going to keep getting worse, and the fight will always kind of keep on. Again, very how a comic book run ends, where it's just goes kind of the war will always eternally be on. He's not saying the Joker's going to be the villain in the sequel or anything. It's meant to be the Joker is shorthand for Batman will always have villains to fight, and these villains will grow worse and thing.
Okay. Here's all right. So here's my thing with that. But you're not writing a fucking comic. You're writing a movie. And that's just what it comes down to. Because now, if he makes the Batman 2, whatever it would be, and Joker's not the villain, you know what we're gonna get? We're gonna get nothing but complaints that they set up Joker and didn't use him.
Well, he said he doesn't want to do Joker for a sequel, which again kind of shoots him in the foot. But I mean, the other thing, the other problem with this is, if he just, developed the final act with all of the random gunmen who have been watching the Riddler this whole time, you could have gotten that same sense without throwing in the Joker. You could have just used the villain in the movie to prove your point.
Yeah, I really, I see everything that you're talking about, and this is the distinction, because you guys both do this, infinitely more than me. I struggle to think of when I go look to see what the creator has to say about why they made a decision here, there, or other. Mostly because I'm fucking lazy, but I'm gonna be pretentious about it and say that it's because I like to judge the piece in and of itself. I don't give a fuck what your intent was. I care about what you put out. And so I don't care what his intent was, what he was going for. I understand the thematic, oh yeah, there is always going to be someone bad around the corner. It's Gotham. It's not, savable in a forever sense. I get all that, but it's the fucking Joker. It feels like sequel bait. Putting it, if it had the other scene with him, it probably would have helped it quite a bit. And you probably wouldn't have gotten demands for, a Joker sequel now, because, well, if you just put the Joker in every movie as, this, fucking buddy that he goes to in prison over and over again, that would be a really cool role for the Joker. Because he's never gotten that kind of vibe before, so that'd be fantastic. But, just the fact that it exists on its own, and the idea that you're not going to get it as a sequel, who knows, maybe he's lying out of his ass just to, try to build up the hype. It's just, fundamentally, I think it's a mistake. It reads like sequel bait, even if he didn't intend for it to be, and it just doesn't feel necessary in the moment. It's not a comic run. It's a movie, and that feels like sequel bait, and it's at a point where you don't need it. It's just, you want the movie to be over.
It's funny, because, even Robert Pattinson will, talk in interviews about when he was making this movie. He's like, I love this movie because it's a big standalone Batman adventure. And he's like, oh, but there is just that one moment at the end where we kind of say, well, we'll be back doing this. But everything else is great. Pattinson's great because the dude is just blunt and honest about everything, except when he's lying out of his ass about his life. So, like, he has said in interviews, like, the movie is great, except for that one thing we do where we just do the thing everyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
Again, and that's one of those things where I do agree with both of you guys. I just bring up the reasoning because I think it's interesting how I believe I think the studio saw that and was like, oh yay, hype, keep it in. They definitely encouraged it because they love shit like that, and obviously the Joker is Sam's fucking thing. I think Matt Reeves didn't, like, because I've listened to a lot of his interviews, like spoiler interviews, like after this film came out and stuff while I've been working, and he really tells Kyle, like, oh no, I didn't mean it like that, guys. Sorry, like that's why I bring it up just because I think it's interesting that you can unintentionally create a post-credits, like I think in a world where that's what we just expect now and that's what these things are, I think it's really funny that he just ended up cutting this movie in a way where it looks like he was doing that as well, and it comes across like that as well, and it's a flaw of the film. I agree. You probably should have cut that or keep the other one. Don't half-ass it.
Yeah, if he kept the other one, it would have worked a lot better. Though, just as a comic fan, like, speaking of these kinds of things, the idea that the Joker would, like, offer the Riddler, like, a pat on the shoulder, nah, hate that. Get that the fuck out of my life. I don't... No, these two hate each other. Like, of all the team-ups that should never happen in comics, it is Joker and Riddler. Because they're too aware of the meta of, like, one's a copy of the other, and they're both really bothered by it.
Honestly, if you're gonna have any Riddler Joker scenes in a movie together, it should have been the one from War and Jokes of Riddles where Bruce Wayne asks them both, and he's like, so why should you get to kill the Batman? And Riddler's got this great, like, speech about, like, defeating Batman and killing him and shooting him in the head after he's watched everyone died. And then the Joker just kind of stares for a minute, and he's like, well, I'm the Joker. He's Batman. And you're the Riddler. And who cares about the Riddler?
Oh, it's so good. Like, that moment, I need it so bad.
It's just gonna be interesting where we go from this and all this, because I will say, although that part is we're coming down negative on, and again, that I think is just a example of how you could have tightened this film up a bit. I do think it is just interesting, like how a lot of, Ian, you know this very specifically because it kind of informs a lot of like your internet history and things, but like when The Dark Knight came out, that movie set like fans ablaze to like build their own, like, oh, here's what this villain would look like in this movie. Batman Begins didn't really do that because Batman Begins didn't have the same impact when it came out. Like it did less money than Superman Returns, so like it took a while for no one to kick that. This is, I think, a really great example of one movie building a universe that I can, like, this has so many, like, we bring in so many fucking characters and imply so much history from this that I can absolutely just see these characters in this world and imply this history that, yeah, I buy it. I buy that this is a Batman universe that can go on for, like, not just 3 films, but, like, 5 films. Like, this feels like a saga kind of vibe.
Can I actually hop in there with one of my like fucking fan theory that if anything in this movie was maybe actually sequel bait? Might have been. Go ahead. Anyone else notice that the adrenaline shot he takes is green?
Yeah, I don't like that either.
I'm kind of like that's kind of hype to me, because especially with like Batman Venom being a thing, is like he just has like a little shot of like this experimental steroid / adrenaline booster on him, and it's green, and I'm like, ooh.
Joker stuff, the potential Venom that everyone's been speculating on about the internet about why the fuck it's green, and the third act for me all kind of bundled in together for one problem for me, which is I don't know if movies are broken or if I am broken, because to me there was a clear point in history, whether you were watching Batman Begins or The Dark Knight or Batman Returns or Batman 89 or Batman Forever or Batman and Robin, where you watch a movie and it's got a beginning, middle, and end, and there was no expectation, no assumption that anyone was ever going to make a sequel again. And so the movie just ends, and you're like, wow, movie's over. I'm going to get on with my life now because I don't know if I'm going to ever see another movie like that again. It's just the one. And then another one comes out and you're kind of hyped about it. the thing that bothers me about the third act being so loose and feeling like a different movie, and the people speculating about Venom and the thing with the Joker, is that I don't know in my pea-sized brain that's been on the internet for too long if this movie feels like a one and done movie the way Begins and Dark Knight do, or if it feels like a movie that's setting up for another. Because I don't want it to feel like a movie setting up for another one. I am having a really, really hard time reconciling if Bruce's speech at the end of this movie is a speech that ends a movie, or if it's just prequel to the Batman 2.
I think it's intentionally the one. It's intentionally a film that can stand on its own. It's just doing that thing that I think Matt Reeves isn't stupid in terms of what these films are, where it can also serve the second one, you know, like it's
and I think that's the smart move to always do as a writer, especially if you're dealing with like a franchise thing, is leave yourself some options to come back. Don't like end a movie, certainly don't make a movie dependent on a sequel has to happen to make the first movie good, and for the love of God, don't do a trilogy that way, but leave yourself some room. And I think that's fine. I think maybe it's just, you know, maybe they just like the color green or whatever, but like having the option to say, no, this was a steroid, it can feel really good. It can feel really brilliant. I think that's a much better, like, quote unquote sequel bait kind of moment, because it's such like a small blink and you miss a detail. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant to what he's doing. You get in the moment what it is and what it needs to be, and you could expand on it later for, no, that was Venom that he took. And then you've got this guy who's just like fucking pumping it into his veins, replacing his blood, kind of shit. That could be really hype, but as it is on its own within this movie, it's fine. It's not distracting from things.
I think my problem,
as opposed to things demanding a sequel.
I think my problem is not any one of those things. It's that there's all of those things where, like, there is the Joker, there is the Venom thing, and there is the monologue at the end. And my problem more generally is so much of the way the arc is worded for this narration at the end is about Gotham's future. There is the shot of like Riddler or of Penguin taking over. There's the stuff about Selena saying Gotham's never going to change. There's Bruce talking in his monologue about I need to be this, and the National Guard are coming in, and the city's like there's so much in the final like 5 to 10 minutes that's so future focused about what the direction of the world is now that this has all happened, that I have a really hard time separating how much of that is sequel bait versus how much of that is the future of the characters in the moment in this movie. It doesn't feel reflective of the 3 hours I watched. It feels too much like it looks forward at the next 3 hours. And I would prefer it way more, kind of like Blade Runner 2049, where if I went on a 3-hour Odyssey, I want my final monologue to be like looking back at the 3 hours I just had, not what I will do for the next 3 hours.
I think the reason why that necessarily wouldn't work in this film is specifically from a character standpoint with Bruce and the difference between vengeance and hope, where hope is inherently not a thing you look back on with. Hope is the possibility of a better tomorrow. Like, hope is the idea that things can improve. And I don't think Bruce looking back on what he's done, because he kind of does a little bit, because he again, it's bookending the opening. It is a direct so we play Nirvana again, but this time it has violins and it's more an uplifting kind of version of it. It's directly and it's in the middle of the day instead of at night. Like, we're really trying to bookend this. So I don't think, I understand what you're saying, Steve. I definitely think the way it's cut and the way it's put together is hurting this intention, but if it can maybe be a little bit more kind of confidence for you to like, oh no, I don't have to worry about this. I do think it is meant to be standalone. I think the idea is more just meant to be, this is Batman on film taken exactly as he should be. This is just Batman being Batman. And by acknowledging that in the same way that we have to acknowledge with Sherlock Holmes or James Bond or King Arthur or Robin Hood or anything, by just acknowledging these characters as they are, you also have to acknowledge that they are eternal. and they will always have more adventures. And movies in the past, before we had end credits, things did do that still with those type of characters. Even though a James Bond movie didn't necessarily know it was going to have a sequel, some of those films ended with like, oh, he got married and he's leaving now, like at the end. But a lot of them end with the possibility of, oh, the next one we're going to do, but we don't need to see the next one, but we know he's going to do another case, he's going to do another mission. I think this is the same way with Batman, and it just feels more sequel bait because it's surrounded by everything else. And like you say, the way the choices the filmmakers made at the end went too heavy with things that we can interpret it as sequel bait to make that narrative. But I would argue it is thematically meant to still be one film, and it's one character's journey. It can just be interpreted as like, oh, it's all meant to be sequel bait if you want to do like a more negative reading of it. But I don't think that's particularly fair to it.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I agree with that example in those contexts, because I don't think Sherlock Holmes movies or James Bond movies do that at all. Because like the exception of On Her Majesty's Secret Service and No Time to Die, none of those movies have an ending that any of the other movies need to stick to, and none of the James Bond movies, with the exception of the Craig movies, have any sense of continuity whatsoever. And neither do 90% of Sherlock Holmes movies. Like, those movies end and they're over. And there's nothing about the future of any of those movies ever. And then the next one starts, and they don't give a fuck about what happened in the last one ever. And I'm not saying this movie needs to go that extreme, but I am saying, in part of what you're saying at the end there, the context we are in the kinds of movies we make now, makes it so that kind of stuff in this particular movie stands out and bothers me way more than it may if we lived in a different context. I would like to know how I would feel about this movie if it wasn't guaranteed a sequel. And I don't like that the movie doesn't operate on the premise of, I want to make a movie that I could only make once and I will never get a sequel. Like, again, Blade Runner 2049, perfect example of this. That's a movie that's 30 years in the making. That movie is built on the premise of, I got to make a sequel to Blade Runner, and no one else will ever get to play with Blade Runner ever again. What do I say? I really, really wish by the end of this movie I felt more solidified in this movie was an experience all its own, and that so much of it doesn't have to, by the end, come down to what we're doing next.
I don't really agree with that. I don't need that from a comic book movie. I don't know what it is. Like, maybe it's the millennial depression, but I don't need everything I love to die.
Die? I'm just saying, like, I don't need my movies to be like, okay, see you next year.
I mean, that's fair, I guess. It just seems like I hear that take, and I just think to the same thing of like, oh, just let things have endings. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I can't like inherently disagree with that, but at the same time,
but like, I'm not.
Fuck it, why not?
There's a right way and a wrong way to do this. I'm saying like the movie has to have an emotional payoff for where it is, and the movie does have an emotional payoff. I don't like that the movie's final notes and the things that that all the conversation focuses on when it's over don't have to do with the emotional payoff of the movie. That's my criticism. Is like, I don't know whether or not what this movie is doing. I don't know, but I don't like that the conversation about this movie and the space it comes out in takes so seriously what comes next that it's really hard to gauge. Just from my experience, it's hard to gauge what this movie is on its own.
It's going to be, I think that would be something, Steve, because I do really see it. It was funny, I've actually had a very similar like argument with Ian a couple while bits ago in like the Discord server, so I know what you're saying. I think the thing that will be telling to this will just be time. I think we'll just how this movie ends up playing 2 years from now, a couple months from now, years from now. I think it's going to be one of those films that's going to be reevaluated, because there's so much fucking stuff happens in this, and and the making of this was so intensive and so long that I think it is just going to have to be one of those things that we're going to have to ask you, like, after Robert Pattinson isn't Batman anymore and we rewatch this film, does it need the other, like, is that changed? Is it, I don't know. It's going to be one of those things.
Yeah, I mean,
can't speak on until now, I feel like.
And I mean, to give again credit where it's due, I think Iron Man 3 and Winter Soldier are two really good movies for this, where when they end, they're not sealing off the potential for sequels, and there is stuff in those movies that set up stuff for the future, but those movies end in a way where it's like, okay, if I never got a Captain America movie again, then Winter Soldier ends on a satisfying note because I know where all the characters stand. I know where they might go in the future, but I see the arc completed. And this one feels a little bit more vague in that territory to me.
Fair enough. All right, do we have anything else we want to talk about with this? Alfie, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to take us to, or any other topics we haven't discussed enough?
I'm really great to see that Colin Farrell was such a big fan of DVDC Bombshell's Khalifa. It was really great to see him handle that performance so heavily. I know Aaron has been sent regards by Mr. Farrell, and like it's just really great to see one of the two people that watched that series like really just get so into the character and bring it to a wider audience. So thank you, Mr. Farrell, for delivering that. Come on, why are you showing me this?
Ya booba.
Take it easy, sweetheart.
Perfection. So that's basically all I've got on it. Cinema for real. Martin Scorsese, meme, best film of all time. I love it. Cool stuff. Excited to see. It'd be curious. I almost want to see like fucking Ian and Steve do like a 2-minute like short review whenever that Joker scene gets released online and just talk about that, because I'm fucking fascinated about what that.
If you don't think I can talk about like a 3-minute scene of the Joker for at least 2 hours, you don't fucking know me.
Oh, I know. That's why I was trying to give it a fucking like shorter runtime, because we need to chain you up, man.
No, I will talk about every scene with the Joker for at least 3 hours.
I'll just talk about anything for 3 hours.
Yeah, for sure. My final thought, the chemistry between Pattinson and Kravitz did not extend to the screen, unfortunately. They those two did not look like they were fucking crawling all over each other to fuck like the actors do. In real life.
I was kind of let down by that because I like Catwoman in this. I like Batman in this. I think they have a cool character dynamic. They do not have chemistry though.
I thought the thing that I agree that they're not as much as they are in real life, because Jesus Christ.
I'm uncomfortable every time Pattinson mentions he has a girlfriend.
Yeah, she really be braver than the troops right now. The thing that I think really stood out to me in terms of like what I thought was kind of like a cool like chemistry backcat moment scenes is I really like the moment where he gives her like the chin touch with like the look at me, and they kind of linger over each other, and then he kind of pulls back from it. I think that's a very Batman moment. Like he's trying to console her, but he also doesn't really know how to do it. I think they do there's a lot of like kind of electricity in that one, and I also really like the fact that he's fucking rewinding the I don't have a relationship with Falcone scene like over and over and over again, and then when Alfred walks in, he like fucking closes the laptop like he's watching porn. I thought that was really, really good. That's a very subtle kind of, this Batman's clearly a virgin and he's seen a girl for the first time, and like he doesn't know how to quite comprehend these strange feelings in his trunks. So this was I like those things, but I agree it wasn't as sexy as or as intense as the trailers or the just the vibe of them together was, but I think it did it. I think it did a good job. I thought it was.
Well, you're the one that's fucking like asexual, so like two characters admitting they have genitals is enough to get you like, whew, wow, this is pretty steamy stuff, guys.
Well, you know, we see how it goes.
Oh, alrighty. Well, I think that'll do it. Let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I will give this film 3.5 out of 5 really fucking sick shots of the Batmobile that like you, even though you know you're fucked, you just have to sit there and like appreciate that fucking car for a minute.
I'll go ahead and give this 4 out of 5 absolutely blaring theme songs every time he walks onto the fucking set.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna give this 5 out of fucking 5 assaulted police officers. Because my god, that was such a cold ass fucking line. So good! Yeah, ACAB Batman! ACAB Batman!
Oh my god, that was so good. That was so good. I
Alrighty.
want one little final wrap up because I didn't get my final say. My final say on this is just I understand with this movie how people felt in '89 when they first saw Batman by Tim Burton. In that that is a kind of a transcendent experience to see a character you love on screen in a way that feels very, very correct. And I'm sure in 30 years people are going to be like, what the fuck do you mean Pattinson was not Batman? And they'll probably be right. But I'm happy that in my lifetime I got that same feeling that people did in '89.
You'll probably be alive in 30 years, Steve. Just so you
never know.
I mean, you're right, but like, let's not be that negative, Steve.
You're gonna do the dick might return, Steve. You know.
Yeah. All right. So, Alfie, you've been away for a good long while. So why don't you give us a discussion topic to come back with next week?
Discussion topic. What's a decent thing to discuss? Well, I guess it's just something that I can talk about and Steve can talk about, and I don't know how much experience you have with it, Ian, like the behind-the-scenes things, but you probably know how to fucking talk about it. It's pretty general. Can we talk about, like, comic book, like, news articles or, like, writing articles? Like just articles relating to, like, comic book characters and, like, that becoming a thing now? Because that's, like, kind of Steve's side hustle now, and I kind of want to talk about it.
The comic news industry, I suppose?
Yeah.
Which is funny because we've done an episode on that, so I guess this would be a good revisit. So that'll be interesting. Comic book journalism part 2, comic book journalism revisited. Okay, yeah, sure, I'm down. All right, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of vengeance.
I'm just vengeance.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be doing shitty Batman impressions.